So on to our next process of memory, which is storage. So this is the storage of memory, how we are going to contain the memory, where it is going to be contained, so that we can later bring it back out. So it's important to know both things about storage. Number one, how we store information, and then also where we store it. So we are going to start with the how, and then move into the where. So first things first. Remember, this is our stores of memory that we have talked about. There are three main stores of memory. We have our sensory memory, okay? This is that immediate sensory information. The working memory, right? That is the waiting room that has everyone working on paperwork and stuff like that. So this is where we're bringing stuff in from long-term memory and putting things in there from sensory memory, and everything's kind of being processed. This is our conscious thoughts. And then we have our long-term memory back here, okay? So where are these things stored? The long-term memory has an unlimited capacity, okay? It is estimated that we have a range from about 1,000 billion to 1 million billion bits of information in our memory. So basically, we don't have a limit to how much we can store in our long-term memory. And this is much different from our short-term or our working memory, right? Our lucky number 7 was that amount of information that we can store in our working memory at one time, plus or minus 2, but our long-term memory has no capacity. This is unlimited. We can store as much as we need to in our long-term memory. There's a story of Rajan Mahadevan, and he recited the first 31,811 digits of pi. That's a lot. That is a lot of numbers to remember, and it probably is because of some of those memory techniques that we saw in the TED Talk, but also because there's no limit to how much we can store in our long-term memory, okay? So, how well have you encoded and stored information? Let's take a little test. So we're going to try and see if you can pull these out of your long-term memory. So we're going to go through a few examples. Penny. When you're looking at a penny, which way does Lincoln face on the penny? To the left. Or I'm sorry, to the right. I'm sorry, I can't tell my directions today. The American flag. How many red stripes versus white stripes does an American flag have? 7 red, 6 white. What about a pencil? How many pencil sides does a wooden pencil have? 6. The Statue of Liberty. Which hand does she hold the torch? The right hand. Who is on the $20 bill? Jackson, Andrew Jackson. And then money. What's on the back of that $20 bill then? The White House. Okay, so these are things that potentially you have stored and encoded into your memory. Okay? So, how do we know that we have memories? So a lot of research has been done to physically find a reason or a place that we can find memories in our brain. And there's 2 different approaches to how memory is physically in our brain. And so this is the search for the engram, okay? The physical memory trace that our brain has. How we can figure out where these long-term memories are coming from. The first is through our synapses. Remember, the synapses are the gaps between neurons, right? And so this is the idea that through these synapses, we can find the physical memory trace within nerve cells. So we can tell because those synapses of what's happening within them. And the other is the neural circuitry. This is using how the parts of the brain are connected in order to determine where our memory is stored. So let's first look at the synapses. In long-term memory, what some psychologists have come to the conclusion is that when we have a new memory that's created, each memory that is encoded leaves a breadcrumb, okay? And it's these chemical traces of neurotransmitters. And over time, the more and more that we use these memories, right? We recall them, we keep them going, they get stronger. That's the idea, okay? So the more we use, the stronger the trail of that memory. This explains kind of like why when you're hit in the head or you get an electric shock, you can lose some of your recent memories because they haven't been consolidated yet. Those memory trails are still being formed through the synapses. So we also call this long-term potentiation, okay? Long-term potentiation is the idea that over time, these synapses are used over and over again for that same memory, okay? Or that same idea that we need to encode. And once we use them over and over and over again, it'll become stronger. Think of this as like walking through a field, okay? The first time you walk through the field, your trail is going to be pretty weak, right? All of that grass might come back up. But if you keep walking over and over through that field, eventually you're going to have a very distinct path. That is exactly what long-term potentiation is saying, except it's not a field, it's the synapses, it's the neural connectivity in your brain, okay? So here's a physical picture of it. With a poor memory, you don't use it very often, you can notice the amount of neurotransmitters that are released are going to be smaller, and the number of receptors are going to be smaller. But over time, after using these memories over and over again, we have more neurotransmitter released, and we have a larger concentration of receptors because it's getting used to using that trail, right? So it knows that it's going to need to use that, and so there's more neurotransmitter, more concentration of receptors. That's the first idea. The second idea of how we store memory is through our neural circuitry. This is the idea that different parts of the brain are going to be used to store different memories, okay? And how they are connected, the different parts of the brain, is going to determine whether or not we lose certain memories, okay? So what they do to study this is they look at individuals who've had parts of their brain either removed or lesioned during operations. And one of the most famous examples is the example of HM. So HM had his hippocampus and his amygdala on both sides of his brain removed in order to control epileptic seizures, okay? And once he had these removed, his seizures went away. However, he could no longer create new memories. Okay, so he could still remember things from before the surgery. However, he could not create any new memories. So this is a kind of crazy idea, right? So what the idea here is that we need those connections of the hippocampus and the amygdala in order for us to form new memories, in order to encode and store them into our long-term memory. That's the idea, okay? So let's look at the parts of the brain that are involved in memory. We know that our prefrontal cortex is involved in the sequence of events. Remember, our prefrontal cortex is going to be kind of like our decision making, our personality, logical thinking. So this part of the brain is not used for like actually storing the event that is happening. Okay, so it's not helping us remember what happened. It's helping us remember the sequence of the events. So what came first, okay? The amygdala, we know, deals a lot with emotions, right? It's going to be our fight or flight, our fear. And so our amygdala helps us encode emotional aspects of memory. So those emotions that you're feeling during the event. Our medial temporal lobe, which you can't see in this picture, it's behind here. It encodes and transfers new explicit memories to the long-term memory. We're going to talk about explicit memories in a little bit. Our hippocampus encodes and transfers new explicit memories to long-term memory. So our hippocampus and our medial temporal lobe do the same thing. They're helping us learn new explicit memories. And then finally, our cerebellum, which is at the back of our head, remember, that controls our movement and our balance. This is going to help us with memories that involve movement, specifically our muscle memory. Okay, so again, here's just a list of the major structures that we talk about. So our hippocampus is going to aid in the initial encoding of information. okay? So this is like kind of the first stop for memories, and then they get sent other places to be remembered. And then our cerebral cortex are where our memories are changed into relatively permanent memories. They're processed and then they're stored in different places. The amygdala strengthens memories that have a strong emotional association. These are those flashbulb memories, right? These emotional connections kind of serve as our aid for access. When we're feeling a certain emotion, we can bring back those memories. And it's probably what's responsible for persistent and troubling memories from PTSD as well. So where do we store these memories? The overall idea is that memories do not exist in one place in the brain, but kind of all over the places. And different parts of the same memory are stored in different parts of the brain, right? So the emotion might be stored in the amygdala while the actual event itself might be stored elsewhere. It depends on the nature and the material. So we talked about this. Okay, so stress. How does stress impact our memory? Well, if we have a heightened emotion, which usually is caused by stress, this makes for stronger memories. Stress seems to boost our activity in the memory forming areas. Okay, so this is why people say they work well under pressure and they can take a test well under pressure, right? Because that stress that you're feeling is actually helping you create memories. It's why we remember a lot of things that are stressful and not so many when we're relaxed. Okay. However, a continued lengthy stressful situation, so if we have stress that is continued, this can actually alter or disrupt our memory. Okay, let's talk about the difference between implicit and explicit memories. Implicit memories are memories that you are not consciously aware of, okay? However, these memories can affect your behavior. So an example, my daughter was bit by a dog last year, and she was only 2 when that happened. Our brains will not consciously remember events that happened before about the age of 4. And so she will not be able to actually recall the event. However, as she gets older, she may still have a heightened fear of dogs. That's an implicit memory, right? She's not consciously aware of the event that caused the fear. However, she can remember that she's afraid of dogs. That's an implicit memory. Part of our implicit memory are our procedural memories. Most of our implicit memories are procedural. These are the things about like brushing your teeth, right? Do you remember learning how to brush your teeth? Probably not, but you still do it, right? Knowing how to boil water, knowing how to use a microwave. All of these are procedural memories that we can do without thinking about, like walking or riding a bike. However, most of these memories, these procedural memories, start as explicit memories that we have to think about them, and then they turn into these procedural implicit memories. Explicit memories, on the other hand, then, are those intentional or conscious recollection of information. You're deliberately trying to remember something, like where you went for your summer vacation, what you did. Those are explicit memories. You have to pull them out and specifically remember them. Okay, so some examples are remembering information you've learned and studied when it's time to take a test. And then eyewitness accounts, what happened in the incident, what were you wearing, etc., etc. So most explicit memories are declarative memories. These are facts like names, faces, dates. Usually these require some sort of conscious mental effort to remember. For example, recalling directions to somewhere without using a GPS, okay? You're going to need to know those specific facts. So there's 2 different types of declarative memories then. We have our semantic memories. These are things like our language, our facts, our general knowledge, the President of the United States, the countries. These are what we learn in school. Then we have our episodic. Think of these episodes in your life, right? These are memories from your life that you're going to recall. So like your first kiss, when you were asked to prom, those are episodic memories. But again, general facts.